So we're 2 days before Thanksgiving for the morning huddle, and it gets to be this time of year, and it's at least for me, today and tomorrow is cram everything in before Thanksgiving. What's today and tomorrow look like for you guys?
Pretty busy for me. This is actually usually my favorite week of the year. Wednesday's like a half day kind of feel, but not this year. It's going to be
Not this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, not for me either, unfortunately. Me and Josh just realized we're both headed to Philadelphia to visit family in Bucks County. This is the first year that me and my brothers are taking over Thanksgiving and cooking for my mom, so my mom gets to relax. But we're using her house still, so.
Do you think your mom will actually relax? Because I know that sounds like a really cool theory for my mom. There's zero chance she would relax.
Oh, exactly. I'm sure she says that she's going to be busy with my son, but I know she'll be popping in the kitchen checking.
And for the record, I said I was excited to go see my family. Stacy, I didn't hear her say that.
Thanks. Just kidding. On a bus.
No, it wasn't. She didn't say.
I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it.
That's all.
Well, I have heavy responsibilities this year, so.
So I started on total accident. I started a little bit of family drama yesterday. We've got, of course, the obligatory family text thread. And I saw this article on how to prepare like the best Thanksgiving turkey. And I was like, oh, I'll send this along. And of course, it was like my mother was like, sure, we can change the way that I do Thanksgiving turkey. Evidently, that's not good enough for you. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I didn't have there was no agenda. It was awesome. All right, let's go ahead and get rolling for Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021. Welcome to the Morning Huddle. I'm Chad Prinky alongside my partner and producer, Stacy Holzinger. Stacy, how are you today?
Good. Great.
What so going to Bucks County, is that like the standard? You always go to mom's?
Yeah, she would not give up her holiday for anything I mean, she's an excellent cook, so I don't think anybody really wanted her to give it up. But this year she's like, I'm taking a break. You guys got the kitchen, so.
It's my best recommendation is to screw it up. That way next year you get to return back to tradition.
No, that's a good idea.
Yeah, that's what I do with the dishes when I'm given that task. That's what I do, anyway. So, all right, cool. So, Stacy, Stacy's role as always is to come in that last 10 minutes and capture all of the awesome questions that come in throughout the course of the session. So for those of you who are viewing live right now on LinkedIn Live, please make sure that you get comfortable with that chat function. Fire your questions across. We want a chance to address those throughout the course of the session. Today, so Stacy, we'll see you with 10 minutes to go. Thank you so much. I know you'll come locked and loaded with some good ones. See you soon.
See ya.
So today, my guest is Josh Hauserman. Josh is a good friend of mine personally, but he is the head of the bonding group for HMS Insurance Associates, where he leads a team of 11 agents and 3 other support staff that help to make those agents successful. And Josh is also always behind the scenes to help not only his own clients, but the rest of his team's clients to solve complex business and construction problems. To help these contractor clients to get things done. I actually knew Josh before I ever met Josh through my clients who, anytime in a conversation over the years, I've been serving the construction industry for 12, 13 years. Over that time frame, I would get into conversations with contractors and talk about their most trusted advisors, their lawyers, their accountants, things like that. And I would hear Josh's name a lot. So we shared a lot of overlap with our account base. And eventually I just thought, I got to meet this guy. People talk about him. My clients speak about him the way I hope they speak to others about me. And so Josh and I got to know each other. He and I share so many views about the building industry. He's taught me a lot personally, so that I've been able to better serve my clients as an advisor. So when I invited Josh to join, I was really excited that he accepted. We're here to talk business, and today's topic is common threads of the most bondable contractors from the view of someone whose team writes somewhere around $8 billion in bonds a year. So, Josh, before we get rolling, give us any additional intro on yourself to give some context. Who are you beyond what I've laid out for our audience?
Yeah, you nailed it. First of all, thanks for having me, and also thanks for hosting our client seminar last week. For additional background, I've been here for close to 17 years now. I started out just handling house account leads and basically supporting our producers. I was in that role for about 5 years and gave me a great deal of experience. I have my master's degree in accounting, which helps a great deal, as you can imagine, in this field. And ever since then, been off and running.
Awesome. So I don't want to take for granted. There are going to be some people who are watching this morning or listening, on the recording that are construction and bonding gurus. They know what they're talking about, right? They've got years and years of experience in the industry. There are also going to be some people who are kind of get the concept of bonding, but they don't. They're certainly not experts.
Mhm.
Could you give us like the 1-minute overview
Yeah.
of what is bonding, just to kind of give context to the remainder of our conversation today?
Yes. So I'll answer it as it relates to the construction industry specifically, but basically it's a credit transaction. To give you like the bond 101 answer, it's the underwriting's based on character, capacity, and capital. Character meaning you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and your references will check out. You haven't had a bankruptcy, things like that. Capacity meaning you have the labor, the equipment, the experience to handle the jobs in your backlog, and capital meaning you have money.
Got it. And so a bond might be defined as what?
I would say a bond in this context is synonymous with a guarantee. So you have a bid bond, which is a guarantee for your bid. Performance bond guarantees your performance of the contract, and a payment bond guarantees payment of subcontractors and suppliers.
Excellent. All right, cool. So with that as the backdrop, it's this, question of credit worthiness, that's going on. Capacity, character, capacity, and what's the last one?
Capital.
Capital, character, capacity, and capital. Okay, good. All right, that's a good backdrop. So I think for what bonding means to me, I think most contractors want to be able to brag about their bonding capacity. Right?
Yes.
Most contractors. My impression is it's a way of sort of humbly communicating their financial stability, strength, trustworthiness, etc. As a bonding pro, what do you think high bonding capacities really signify when somebody says, we've got X, desirable bonding capacity?
Yes. First, I would agree with you. I think it's a status symbol within the construction community, and really what it represents is staying power. And I would argue that the underwriting process is effectively like a construction best practices checklist. You kind of you get into a contractor's operation, and you see, look under the hood and see how they perform, and all the upside, the downside, and everything else.
You mentioned best practices. Best practices in what way? Well, what are some of the examples of best practices, or the checklist? So if I'm a contractor, this is valuable information because there's clearly a list of are you doing things right?
Yep.
That underwriters are using. What are some of the things that are included in that kind of best practices?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's in a word or two words, operational excellence, and that's in every department and throughout the organization. So that starts with knowing your costs and having a accurate accounting system, bidding, having checks and balances in your bid process. Obviously, having the experience in the field, having the labor to support the projects that you're bidding. Good subcontractor relationships, whether you're a GC or a subcontractor. identifying risks on projects. And I think the biggest thing is you can tell in a conversation with a contractor if when you bring up, potential pitfalls or things that could drive a project to go sideways, if that contractor has uh, a backup plan for their backup plans. I think that's the best way to put it. So in other words, if I've been in meetings where there's concern about labor and, we have a great crew here, but what if the next contractor comes over and offers, the field labor $2 more an hour and, they disappear one day, what do you do? So you have to think about scenarios like that. How are you going to manage your subcontractors on the critical path? Yeah, just, evaluating contract terms. You have to have controls in place. And really just vetting not only project risk but operational risk within your organization.
Interesting. I'll tell you one thing that I would zoom in on is this idea. As I listened to your checklist, okay, things went from, in my mind, kind of basic to more and more and more complex as you kind of went down the line. So I'm just going through like knowing your costs. Gosh, I bet you that there's a substantial number of contractors that can't check that box, fully. So when somebody, and then there's maybe the contingency plan for the contingency plan, being
Mm-hmm.
that one's sort of really advanced. So
Right.
if you've got knowing your costs as a foundational item, then there's contingency plans for contingency plans as something that is, do you think about this at all in any kind of hierarchy? Is that something that you, look at, or is that just my interpretation?
I wouldn't necessarily look at it in that way. I would look at it more along the lines of you're only as strong as your weakest link. So if you think about it, if there's 20 boxes to check and you check 19 of them, that one unchecked box could be the shortfall that takes the company under. So in my opinion, I think it's you try to have as much depth as possible in each line item.
Got it. So one of the things that I know, certainly most contractors spend a lot of time thinking about, and rightfully so, for lots of business reasons and personal reasons, is profitability.
Mhm.
But what role does profitability play? Is it just one of the check boxes? What role does profitability play in a company's bonding capacity?
It's huge, but it depends on the metric. So, for instance, I'm going to dig in deep and then I'll walk it back a little bit. But obviously, profitability is paramount in the bond underwriting process because ultimately profitability enables a contractor to build their balance sheet. And once you have the working capital and equity, basically that effectively means that you do have staying power, and that's what getting bonded is ultimately all about. The caveat to that is you want to be best practices relative to profitability, except I'd argue on one item that is counter to bond underwriting as it relates to profitability, and that's the return on investment metric. Because basically you can drive that metric higher with a leaner balance sheet, which is counter, like I said, it's counter to bond underwriting, where it's bond underwriting is based on balance sheet metrics and having the wherewithal to weather a bad job or weather downturns in the economy. And obviously all of that starts with profitability. But that's the one carve out that I'd say is ROI isn't necessarily a metric, but to answer your question, yeah, profitability is paramount.
At the risk of going into real bonding geek land, talk more about the ROI metric. What
So
is it?
we actually, yeah, we wouldn't, right? So return on investment is basically net income relative to your equity or starting capital in the company.
Got it.
From my perspective, that's not, I say it's counter to our underwriting metrics because if you came to me and said you were going to start a construction business, and you gave me two scenarios, one where you were going to put in $1 million to start, and another scenario where you're going to put in $2 million to start, I would probably recommend the 2 million, obviously depending on what you wanted to do. But that checks that, staying power box in a more effective manner, if that makes sense.
It does. So what are let me ask this question. I'm interested in what we can learn from the companies who consistently look the best in the eyes of underwriters. So for this audience that mostly consists of contractors, and also people who deal with contractors on a daily basis, what can we learn from the companies who consistently are viewed as good risks in the eyes of underwriters?
I would go back to the best practices approach. I think one of the very important things, and obviously this depends on where a contractor is in their life cycle, and if it's a long-standing contractor that has a long history of profitability, it's going to be a different scenario, and they might not need the level of advice. However, I mean, it comes back to operational excellence in every department, right? So with your going back to knowing your costs, I think that's imperative because you're making management decisions based on your performance. You're not going to know your performance unless you have accurate cost controls. You're not going to be able to bid accurately if you don't know all of your costs and know them accurately. You're not going to know which customers to focus on or what scopes of work to focus on if you don't have those true cost figures. So I'd start there, and then if you think about contingency planning, having a stable of subcontractors and suppliers, having plan A, plan B, plan C. That also goes for capital as well, right? Best practices would tell you to tell contractors to establish a working capital line of credit, but not necessarily use it, and keep it for a rainy day. And that way, if a project does go sideways or if there's a hiccup along the way, you have an outlet.
I want to get back to this cost controls thing for a second, Josh. Is that really practically, if I were a contractor and said I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I really don't have a handle fully on my costs, I get to the end of the project and I'm kind of holding my breath, and that's where I peek and see, like, did we do okay? And some of them it's even tougher, right? They get to the end of the year and it's really like, what's left at the end, if I'm in that boat, what are some tangible recommendations that you would have for getting my hands wrapped around my costs? Like, just what are some things that you've seen your clients do that give them better control?
That's a good question. Again, that would depend on the size of the contractor. But I think the easy answer is leverage technology. Whether it's having a project management system tied to your accounting system that ties to your bidding system, and have everything integrated. From my perspective, I think doing a post-mortem analysis is imperative, right? That's how you know how your project teams are performing, how valuable your customers are to you, and types of work. So I would say leveraging technology, and the second thing is lean on trusted industry professionals. And in that world, it's obviously your construction-oriented CPA. I think that's imperative. I think a lot of the time you can ask most CPAs if they specialize in construction. I would say most might say yes. My recommendation is look at companies that you admire, and companies, other contractors that you strive to be like them, and look at the industry professionals that they work with, and start there for your CPA, for your attorney, for your construction consultant, bond agent, insurance agent, the whole nine.
Makes total sense. Yep, I agree. I think the answer, said in maybe a different way, is also don't try to go it alone. There's technology,
Yes.
and there are professionals that are literally there to help you to get your hands wrapped around that stuff. And there's absolutely nothing that should stop you from reaching out to those folks. Just a quick reminder to our audience, please, start firing in some questions, from your perspective, so that we can shift gears to that in just a few minutes. while I move on to another question. Yeah, what are the most common mistakes that you see contractors make that are most damaging to their bondability?
Good question. The short answer is losing money. But the situations that I've seen lead to losing money, it's any combination of trying to grow too fast, owner disengagement, lack of internal controls. A big one that I've seen is obviously jobs can go sideways. The construction industry is very dynamic, but if you see that there's a systemic problem and there's systemic risk either on the specific scope of work that you're pursuing or a specific customer or type of contract, if you see a systemic risk and you do not address it, it's going to come back to haunt you. So I've seen that quite a bit. Yeah, and then just not, I guess the attitude, not having the attitude of I don't know what I don't know. I think obviously you need to be confident, but you have to have that little devil's advocate in your ear from time to time.
To me, it goes down to how I'm translating what you're saying is it goes down to working on your business. So when it comes to working on your bonding capacity, what you're not working on your bonding capacity, you're working on your business.
Yes.
That's what you're really doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so if a part of what you want is to improve your bondability, which will enable more growth, which will enable more opportunity and profitability and all those different types of things, if that's what you're looking for, you can't accept your things as they are today and say, yeah, this is just, it's what I know. It's what, this isn't what I do. I'm not going to be great at these things. One of the biggest problems or kind of, I don't know, nails on a chalkboard for me when I hear is that like we don't want to overdo process. We just really don't like, we like, kind of allowing our people freedom, right? Which is, to me, it's all, I'm not opposed to either of those comments, but usually when I look under the hood, what that is code for is like, we like to wing everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is a really good indicator of somebody that it's going to be really difficult if you have that mindset to actually work on improving it, to actually improve your business. Because you're just resisting adopting best practices and principles. So, all right, I want to open up the door for the questions that are coming in and toss the ball here to Stacy, who I'm going to bring back. Stacy, what do we got? What kind of questions do we have for Josh?
Sure. So what advice would you give a contractor looking to grow their bonding capacity?
And this actually ties into Chad's last question too, but focus on the bottom line. Don't chase revenue. Don't chase the top line. Focus on the bottom line. Retain profits. Establish controls and systems. Lean on your trusted advisors. You're just like we had mentioned, CPA, attorney, construction consultant, bond agent, insurance agent, the whole nine. Obviously leveraging technology. And I think the biggest thing, frankly, for me in life is just having a growth mindset and always trying to learn. You never want to be in a position to have the industry pass you by. And if you think about what it takes to maximize your bonding capacity and the goal of bonding companies in establishing a bond program with a contractor, it's staying power. And I haven't talked to any contractors who tell me their 5-year plan, and that includes going bankrupt in year 5, right? So the goals are aligned in that regard. The friction usually comes with the amount of capital that's required to retain in the company to substantiate a larger bond program. So I think that's the key: profitability and retaining earnings, and then growing from there.
So I have a follow-on question regarding profitability. I totally agree with you that companies put way too much emphasis on top line growth, and not nearly enough emphasis on what that ultimately means to profitability. But Is there such a thing as too much focus on profitability? And in other words, are there here? How about this? Are there costs that you wouldn't recommend cutting? You know what I mean? Are
Yeah,
there costs
look,
that you're sort of saying, don't do that, don't cut
yes, yeah,
these
yeah.
costs?
So, yeah, it's a good question. So, you don't want to step over dollars to reach for pennies, right? You don't want to try to maximize your profitability this year and sacrifice your profitability the following 3 years as a result. So, obviously, it's a balance. So, when I say retain earnings and focus on profitability, that still requires leaning on your trusted advisors and industry professionals. Obviously, there's a cost that comes with that. Leveraging technology, there's a cost that comes with that, but that's not. Those are investments, in my opinion. So I think differentiate between, investing in the future, investing in your company. That's obviously imperative as it relates to staying power. But if you're looking to cut costs, do you need to go to an industry event across the country and stay an extra week, like that, something like that? That's obviously not necessarily an investment in your company. So yeah, to answer your question, I'm not saying cut all costs and pinch every penny. It's invest in your company and keep an eye on the long term.
And do underwriters get that? So if I'm able to show the underwriter, if I'm able to sort of say like, okay, yes, we did not improve our bottom line last year. We did 3% in 2020. We're gonna do 3% again in bottom line in 2021. But I want you to see here this, $140,000 worth of investments that we've made that I could have let go to the bottom line, but that we actually put into this training program, that we put into employee raises so that we became more durable against rising incomes, and we didn't want to lose our key people to outside. Yep. Do underwriters get that? Do they do you get an opportunity to tell that story?
Yeah, I mean, quite simply, that's our job as a bond professional and bond agent, right? So a story like that doesn't necessarily jump off the page and it's not like it's highlighted in the financials,
right?
But our job is to provide context around those financials. That's an easy story to tell if a company's still profitable and making investments into the future. If it's a situation where like everything else, it's a balance. So if there's a scenario where you have a contractor who's lost money 3 years in a row and it's the same narrative all 3 years, like it's not going to fly. So there's a balance there, but the short answer is absolutely. That's part of the story, and obviously it's an investment in the future, and obviously that matters. And that's ultimately what bonding companies want, is staying power and a long-term view on things.
Awesome. All right, Stacey, what else?
Yeah, so Blake Radcliffe asked, with so many projects running over schedule and over budget, plus rising labor challenges, how are you calculating and managing risk?
So I wouldn't say there's a set metric relative to that type of risk. It's let's have a conversation about how you're going to address it. So when I mentioned previously, you have your plan A and your plan B and your plan C. That doesn't necessarily mean that plans B and C are still, makes the job of whatever, like a very successful job for you. But if it's something that keeps it from being a total disaster, that helps. So I think the biggest thing is just having contingency plans. So in other words, with all the supply chain issues now, are you able to substitute products? Are you able to obtain supply bonds from suppliers? Which, in my world, it's always mentioned, but I know in practice it's more challenging than it would otherwise appear. But just things like that, and having access, if you're a subcontractor, having access to not only the GC but the owner, to have those conversations of contingency plans relative to specified materials, things like that, and relative to labor. If you can't staff a job, maybe not bid it. If you have the labor at the bid date and it evaporates by the time the project starts, then maybe plan B is subbing it out. You're obviously sacrificing margin, but at least like I said, it'll keep you from it'll avoid a large problem and maybe keep it a small problem.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's so there's it's all about making sure that you have given consideration to what would be necessary if I still had to perform. How would I work through these things? What are alternate materials? What are alternate labor sources? What are alternate vendors? All those types of solutions. And you still might struggle, but from an underwriting standpoint, that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, and just go into a job eyes wide open. And if you're concerned about something where you don't have, you're not satisfied with your, plan C, then, talk to your attorney and see if you can have an outlet in that, just contractually and have an outlet in that regard.
Yeah. Great point. All right, cool. Stacey, I think we might have time for one more.
Okay. So Eric TV said, we understand the most important things to a surety is equity, history, consistency, stability, routine process, procedure. And what are the 3 most detrimental attributes in the eyes of a surety? If you had to pick 3.
3 most detrimental attributes. Ooh, I like that.
Yeah. I would say it depends on where the questioner is coming from. But from my seat, if somebody calls me and says they need a bond and we start talking through that process, if in that process, I mentioned the character, the first C that I mentioned, I'm in that first conversation, I might ask if, how their personal credit report looks. And that answer is very telling. And the statistics behind somebody who's had a bankruptcy, for instance, it doesn't bode well for round 2 of starting a business. So I would say, character and more narrowly defined personal credit is a huge item. I would say it depends on the contractor, but I would say as the underwriting process unfolds, look for systemic items that might cause either project losses or overall operating losses. So it might be as simple as, we've had subcontractor failures on 3 projects and that, tanked our year. Well, what are we doing about that process? Are we increasing your pre-qualification? It's the whole name of the game is identify systemic risks and understand why you aren't profitable if you aren't. So I wouldn't necessarily narrow it down to 3 specific items, but the bottom line is anything that prohibits you from being profitable is probably, name those as 1, 2, and 3. And it depends on the scope of work and the trade.
I like the overriding first bullet of like, do you pay your bills?
Yes, exactly. You do what you say you're going to do. Good start.
If you don't pay your bills as an individual, that might be a problem in as a business. And the systemic problems, to me, that's really maybe how I would put a bow on the conversation or wrap up the conversation that we've talked through today is that you've got to identify those things in your business that are creating negative business outcomes, period. That's what you mean by systemic issues, right?
Exactly. Yep.
And having identified those, be taking proactive steps to address those issues. And then you didn't say this, but I will. Do everyone a favor and don't just throw a body at it. Okay. Yes. So one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is we're getting this problem. I need a VP of ops. We're getting this problem. I need a CFO. We're getting this problem. And that may be true, but you also have to take personal responsibility for that as a business owner, as an executive team, personal responsibility for how that thing is happening rather than just bringing somebody else in to deal with a broken situation.
Mm-hmm.
Because I cannot tell you how many people I see who are hired and who fail because the problem wasn't that they didn't have somebody in the role. The problem was that there are 6 other things that are contributing in that business to why that consistently happens. And that person hasn't been given control over changing those things.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right. Anyway, we're up on time and we really like to finish on time. So Josh, I really, again, Stacey and I appreciate you taking the time to join us today and to share your knowledge. I can honestly say that every time I speak with Josh, I get smarter and I hope that you guys did today too. I feel like I hope you feel like you learned something. So just a couple of quick things to wrap up. Number one, make sure that if you didn't catch this whole thing and you want to make sure that you get access to it, we are posting these on YouTube. Stacy and I are sending out a weekly email that has that has the registration for the upcoming session, and that has the link from the previous session. We're getting better at that part, so hang in there with us. But if you want to get an email distribution, shoot us a private chat, and we'll get you added to our email distribution list. That's number one. We do this every Tuesday, though in December we're going to take a little bit of time off. We do this every Tuesday, and next week we will be running this on the 30th. And if I'm not mistaken, Stacy, is that you and I?
Yes.
On the 30th?
We need a guest to sub in for questions.
Yeah, no kidding. So Stacy and I are going to be talking about marketing best practices for contractors, which I'm psyched about, and Stacy is a real pro on. So I look forward to having that discussion. And so yeah, 8 a.m. Eastern next Tuesday. If you can't join, you can always catch the recording on LinkedIn or on YouTube. And if you want to make sure that you don't have to rely on LinkedIn to send you messages, send us your email address, and we'll take care of that for you. Josh, any final word for the audience before we sign off? Anything you want to say?
Thank you both for having me. Thanks for listening, and happy Thanksgiving. Be safe.
Thanks. You do the same. Stacy, anything you want to say to wrap us up?
If we didn't get to your questions, feel free to reach out to Josh, and I'm sure he could help you with anything. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thanks so much. Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. See you, team.
See ya.
Bye-bye.